patience and grace are one of the kindest ways that you could be with your teams, with your leaders, with your employees, and just be available. Because if it's not this season for you, it'll be this season soon for you that you also are going to be dealing with your own outside of work big deal something.
Welcome to the Millionaire Maker Show, a podcast helping entrepreneurs scale their businesses online to create more time, more money, more freedom, and more impact. Now, with over 20 years of business building, coaching, and consulting experience, here's your host, author, speaker, and creator of the Millionaire Maker Funnel, Lindsay Anderson.
Hey, everybody. So excited for our next guest, Miss Linda Cohen. She is helping leaders and organizations with their culture of kindness. I'm so excited to bring her on today. Hey, Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Now, before we dive into the culture of kindness and your real specialty here, I heard that you grew up in Vermont and you raised pigs and tapped your own maple trees. Is that true?
That is all true. How crazy, yes?
What was that like? Tell me the coolest thing about that.
Oh, I did not think it was cool as a teenager.
Oh, you didn't?
I'm sorry to say. I thought it was the most backward place, I think, to be living. I'm sorry if there are people in Vermont. Just as a teenager, there were no movies nearby and not as much fast food and no concerts. So that's what you want when you're a teenager. Now, as an adult, though, I feel like it was super grounding. My parents raised fresh fruits and vegetables. My dad had a sugar shack every winter where we tapped the trees and fresh maple syrup. Oh, I cannot eat a bad maple syrup anymore. It has to be good.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's dive into our interview here. So tell me, Linda, what are you known for?
I'm known as the kindness catalyst, and I have been speaking about this topic of kindness now for more than a decade. And I think I'm known for just a new opportunity for leaders and managers to look at how am I leading my teams? Am I doing it with empathy, compassion, kindness? Have we adapted? Have we adapted to the new times and the new ways we're doing work? And so I bring that to my work and my leadership team. And we use the word kindness as the probably the overarching theme of what the lens we're using to look at all these things.
That's very interesting. So are you saying, so you go into these organizations and you preach kindness? Are you saying they weren't being kind before? Or can you add some contrast to that?
I wouldn't say that organizations are not being kind that hire me. I would say that organizations that want to work with me this is an important mission to them. They realize that there is a lot going on in people's lives, in the world, and the leaders think that kindness is a piece that could be really elevated or amplified. I work with healthcare and senior living and credit unions and retail and government organizations. And I love it when a leader really thinks that this trait of kindness can be something that we can practice and we can dive into. And when you're working with human beings, there is a lot that goes on. And even the simplest thing that's happening, two human beings together, could be looked at. Could we take a different view of that? Could we look at that from the other person's perspective? Sometimes just that can be an opportunity to re-enter a conversation with a new perspective.
And have you seen that this culture of kindness in today's day and age? It doesn't feel like you run into a lot of kind people. You say this about corporations, like you're not going to be associating the word kind to many organizations these days. What are the benefits that you've seen with this work that you've done for corporations to start adopting this outside of it's just the right thing to do?
I'm going to just back up and disagree with you. I think that actually most people are kind. I think that we are living in a world where we are being told that people are different than us and that there is no way we can find common ground with them. And I heartily disagree because I really believe that most of us, people are kind. And in fact, I went out into downtown Portland back in October because I was doubting whether my work up until this point, am I in a silo? Am I only looking at companies that are behaving in a certain way? Does the average person feel like there's kindness out there? And so in October, I hired a videographer and I went to downtown Portland, which I don't know if your listeners are all around the country. Portland got some pretty bad rap during the pandemic, and our downtown was being talked about in really difficult ways. And I talked to 20 people, random people who I called over to talk to us. 19 of them told me a story that had happened either that day or within the last 24 hours about something that had happened with a stranger, a coworker, a boss that had been kind. And most of them said the same kinds of things that I say. Kindness is contagious. It's really important that we elevate that this is an important thing to focus on. There was one gentleman who said, living in Portland, originally from New Zealand, he didn't feel like people smiled at him or looked at him. And he did wonder what was going on in our society. And of course, at the end, we shook hands and he smiled and we got that on camera. It was great. But I really believe that most people are kind. And so I'm also going to say that I think companies that are looking at this, when I'm in an audience and I say during my Economy of Kindness program, tell me about a company that you love to go to or shop at or go back to. People will always tell me a story. Actually, yesterday I had a program and somebody talked about two dentist experiences, two dental appointments. She had one for her daughter and one for herself back to back in the same day. And she talked about the fact that she could tell so clearly it was an orthodontics for her daughter. That person was just, there was so much more kindness in that dental office than there was in hers, which was very rote and matter of fact. And she said it was just such a stark example of a business being run with a kind culture and one that maybe is just being run not focusing on that. And I want to hear about often companies that are named companies that people would know and recognize that people feel really seen as a customer. And so they go back to those companies because that's where they want to support them.
So you're saying that when you support this culture of kindness, it not only has an effect on your employees and making them happier so they're more productive and serving your customers in a better way, but your customers are also feeling this when you like go into your company culture with, we want to be kind.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think really as a leader and as a manager of a company, you have to be thinking about how your employees are doing. I honestly think if you treat your employees with a culture of kindness, they will be a better employee. They'll be a better human being. They'll be a better spouse because now they feel like their needs are being met. We spend a lot of our day at a workplace. And if
Mhm.
that workplace is toxic and we don't feel seen and we don't feel like our job is valued, some people have to stick around because they need the paycheck, but they're going to get sick or they're not going to do well. And it's certainly going to come back into their household because of that experience that they're bringing back. Whereas if you are treating people with love and compassion and kindness, and I know these are, and people don't always like to talk about them in a work setting, although that's changing too in the years that
Mhm.
I've been doing this work. I believe that you will have employees who they stay around a lot. So my three bottom lines are, what is the reputation of your company? These are my three R's for why I think kindness is important in the workplace. Your reputation, being able to recruit great talent because people know about your company and they want to work for you, and then being able to retain that talent because once they start with your organization, they love it. They feel the culture. They feel like they're seen and valued, and I'm a part of something bigger, which is really what we all want, I think, is to belong to something and feel like we're part of something that's making a difference, that's good in the world. And I know a lot of people want that.
Yeah, was there a pivotal moment in your life, Linda, that you actually realized, "Oh, kindness is my thing. This is what I'm doing here."
Yeah, I actually fell into this work. I had a pretty challenging relationship with my own father. And when I found out he was dying of lung cancer in 2006, I tried to do some healing with him. He was a therapist, and we had eight amazing months when he knew he was dying to do some healing. And after he passed away, I decided I wanted to honor him and I wanted to take on a project. I called it my 1000 mitzvahs project. And in Judaism, that word mitzvah is a good deed or an act of kindness. And I started that project just as a way to heal from my own relationship. But during that time, just so many lessons were being learned by me about what it looked like to go into the world and focus on the kindness every day. And that was what began to be my inspiration for my first book, which was 1000 Mitzvahs, How Small Acts of Kindness Can Heal, Inspire, and Change Your Life. I started speaking about this soon after the book came out. I was on I did a TED recording back in 2011. And then in 2014, I knew I wanted to take this work to corporate and a more business focused audiences because at that point I was really starting to pay attention to businesses that were focusing on this, and I was starting to see that I could talk about that, I could make a difference, I could talk to leaders and managers about what it really means to elevate a culture of kindness in the workplace. And that's where I've been for the last decade, is leaning into that work. So I feel like it was a bit of a calling, but I am so grateful that this is the work I'm getting to do now.
Yeah, it's good work. How do you tell me a little bit about how you help corporations with this company culture of kindness?
So I have a couple of ways. I mean, I'm a keynote speaker, so I can come in and do, an all staff event or a leadership event and speak for 45 minutes to an hour, perhaps. I wrote a second book during the pandemic called The Economy of Kindness, How Kindness Trans. So oftentimes a company will purchase the book because I only get 45 minutes or an hour in a keynote. That might be something that has many more stories and much more information and tactical and practical things that I can't always give in just a 45-minute conversation. But we start with the conversation about how can we start looking at this? And look, I'm not talking about something a lot of people don't know about. People know the word kindness. And really, it's just how do we implement that into our culture? So we talk about ways that we can elevate our communication. We can see that recognition if you're not doing it well and routinely, that can impact your bottom line. We talk about self-care. Managers are your most important person in your corporation. And if they are being taken care of both by the organization and themselves, they will be able to help elevate everybody else that they manage. So my keynote and my book are that. I've also started doing a lot more deep dive work, and I have clients that have hired me on retainer to do consulting work where we do multiple programs, or we do it with different management departments, and maybe I record videos that are evergreen that you can share with your onboarding process. So a variety of ways. I have bite-sized kindness, which are a monthly kindness idea that I've helped your leaders perpetuate around the organization. In senior living, I have a kindness bingo that's very important in senior living. So that was fun to create a way that departments can have a fun way to elevate their culture in a way that is important. And we always play bingo anyway in senior living. So that's a fun way to do it.
So it sounds like you just have a lot of strategies, ideas, and methods for incorporating kindness into a company culture. Like it sounds like you just have an endless amount of ways you can help companies do this based on your vast experience here.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like when I started, it was a 1 minute, 45-minute keynote. But as I worked more with companies and clients and been asked, can you do this? Can you help us with this? Then yes, my opportunities and my offerings have definitely grown in the last decade.
So when they're implementing your methods and strategies and incorporating kindness into their company culture, what are some common obstacles that people are running into that you're helping them through?
I think it's really talking about what's working in your organization. Maybe you're already doing recognition really well, or maybe I bring to the table the idea that we're really not doing recognition. How can we start that process and sharing why that's important? So both the why and the tactical become important as we do that. Talking about sometimes I've been asked by a client recently to can we use different words to talk about kindness? This is a client I've been working with for a couple of years. So we came up with 11 characteristics of kindness, patience and grace and understanding and empathy. And we came up with a way that we as the leaders could talk about how can we dig a little deeper into our culture. And maybe we don't always call it kindness, but there are obviously things that come up that can be a different way that we dig into these important pieces of our culture. And depending if I love getting, I've actually really enjoyed the deeper dives with companies because I feel like it allows me, we know each other more. I'm not working with a group of strangers really at the beginning and I get a high level introduction to them. I really love being able to dig in a little deeper and get to know the manager that I'm working with and help them. Maybe we have a call and there's a scenario that comes up with one of those managers and somebody else has a similar issue. And so maybe we can do a little brainstorming in our session just to get to the bottom of that. And I think it's largely a frame of mind. It's a mindset. If I am looking, this is what came out for me too. When I was looking for ways to do my 1,000 mitzvahs, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, but I'm now walking through the world thinking, oh, what can I do that could add a little bit of extra kindness today to somebody, some random person, because I never knew what I was going to do. That's what I teach as well, because in any day-to-day interaction, if you're in a company, you are going to have interactions with lots of your coworkers, and maybe you aren't even thinking about kindness because it's not on the top of your mind. But if we start having it be on the top of our mind, then maybe you recognize if you haven't behaved in the most kind way. Oh, I want to go back and apologize. Or maybe I have behaved in the most kind way and I go, I want to do more of how can we bring more of that? And how can I teach that to my team? And it's been very gratifying when managers have come back to me and said, that's really working with my team. I can see now that I have a lot of kindness catalysts and I want everybody to be a kindness catalyst. So I love using that word. And I can already see that bubbling up within my department.
So you brought up this idea of recognition. And so this is one of the main points. It's like, hey, recognition is like one of the main ways to bring kindness in your company. Do you have any other points that you could share with us like that where we can start bringing kindness into our company? I love the idea of recognition. What are some other ideas?
Communication would probably be the second thing because a lot of people struggle with how do I have a difficult conversation with someone? How do I have that with empathy and compassion and kindness? And how do I if I'm busy and I'm stressed out in my day to day, then my conversations are not necessarily going to be kind. So it's really both a working on yourself, maybe as a leader, and being able to see we can set up some parameters for how we can have healthy, kind conversations, even when they're difficult. And this has been really fascinating for me to observe as well when I see managers and we'll have a brainstorming call, and a couple of managers with similar roles and similar kinds of companies will come together and help each other brainstorm how could be a better way to handle that when I have an employee who isn't having the behavior that I want. So
And
is there
that's the
anything
real
else?
tricky thing about kindness, right? Is it's easy when I'm in a good mood to be
Yep.
kind to everybody,
Yep.
but if my boss is doing stuff and I am stressed, as you said, being kind is on the low end of my list, but if I have some tools in my tool belt to know how to appropriately handle these conversations that I'm not gonna turn around and regret later, this can be
Right.
extremely powerful in an organization.
And one other tool I would somebody's going to put this in the self-care category, but I would say learning to utilize your breath because I work in a lot of healthcare settings and senior living groups, and their days are so many things coming at them all the time. There's never a day when that isn't the case, especially the leaders of these or department heads of the kinds of organizations. So, can I remember that I have to ground myself? And if I've just had an interaction with my boss that has been really challenging, before I go and talk to my staff members, I need to take a breath and make sure I can recenter myself because when you respond in that moment, when you haven't taken a breath, you're going to be angry and you are going to regret what. So I think it's a kind of body, mind, spirit, being able to learn some of those skills. And we've talked about that. I've enjoyed talking about that with some of my leaders around what do they do? And I remember once a nurse or a person told me that when they're entering a resident or a customer, or client, patient's door, they just take a moment to reground themselves so that they know they're going to be present in that moment. And a lot of people are on autopilot. That's how we tend to live our lives. So this can be a reframing of so many things. And this is going to help you as a wife or a husband or a significant other or as a parent. All of these tools are going to be beneficial. And so I think that is also why my work resonates because I may be talking to an audience and I'm getting head nods and they're maybe not even thinking about this in the work setting. They're like, I got to use this with my spouse or my kid. So yeah.
And just to get a little bit of clarity on that taking a breath. So, do you have a process or is it literally just you just got to go and take a breath? What is it? What's the strategy there?
The 3 deep breaths get you out of and I'm not a scientist or doctor, but there's a difference between your parasympathetic nervous system and your other nervous system. I think I'm sorry. For your listeners, I should know exactly what that is, but I know when you take 3 deep belly breaths, you are changing your home space, let's just say. And so when you take 3 deep breaths, make sure you feel your feet on the ground. That is all you need. It takes less than 30 seconds to have changed how you're physically going to feel and enter that next situation.
It's a heck of a
I
tool you
also
just shared there,
box,
Linda. Thank you. That's a good
yeah,
one.
box breath is another one. I don't know if box breath is
Yeah,
familiar.
explain that to us. Yeah, explain that
So
one.
that is maybe 4 or 6 counts of in breath. You hold it for the same amount of time. You exhale for that same amount of time, and then you hold it again. So you're basically making 4 breaths up, hold it, 4 breaths out, hold it. And when you do that, you can feel yourself. That may take a minute or a minute or two, but I can tell you and I loved learning more about breath. I'm not an expert in it, but I know physically for myself, and I use it daily. There are opportunities for changing how you're reacting and acting. That's another thing I teach. It's about we can't control so much of our life, especially during COVID. I think that became eminently clear that there's so many things outside of our self that we can't control, but we can always control how we act or react in any situation. And so I think learning those tools for yourself can be helpful as a manager.
Yeah, I love breath work. I also start my day with breath work and really those 3 breaths. I think that's the killer tip for today is like those 3 breaths will take you out of this fight or flight response where you can actually really start thinking clearly. So that was a great tip. Great tip. Okay, so outside of daily breaths, do you have anything else that you can share with the audience that we can do daily to incorporate kindness into our culture?
I would start a gratitude practice in your workplace if you don't have that. And you could do that with a big board, a big, huge post-it note board in your lunchroom. What are you grateful for? You could create gratitude journals. You could encourage, I have one client, and they weren't clients of mine, but I learned about what they were doing. They created a gratitude journal They wanted their employees to do this. It was going to be a requirement for 30 days. And anybody who completed the gratitude journal for 30 days was going to be entered in a raffle. And they were going to choose one employee and a significant other to go on a trip to Hawaii. They got practically 100% participation because everybody wanted to be part of it. And that was how they were incentivizing the behavior that they wanted anyway, which is that we're focusing on gratitude. And we know that when we focus on it for 30 days, we might have a changed behavior. So I really loved that. And I think doing that collectively, I've seen it done in hospitals with signs on a wall. I've seen it done with signs in a lunchroom. But personally, I have a gratitude practice and I've had one pretty much since my dad passed away, which is, and it could be writing it down at night. It could just be that you turn to your whoever, if you share a bed with someone and you say, what are we grateful for today? Or you do it with your kids. I've heard it done roses and thorns. You could say something good that happened today or something that was challenging. But I think when we acknowledge that, it must be a signal that we are grateful for what we have and we'll get more of some of the good stuff, even if there are hard things happening in our lives. So
I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah,
Yeah, I also have a gratitude. I agree. A gratitude, it's huge. It really, for me, changes my perspective of how I view my whole day because you're viewing it through a completely different lens. So I'm so glad that you shared that. In terms of kindness and the future in corporations, what do you see the future of kindness being, Linda?
I think it's growing. To be honest, I know that sounds so Pollyannish maybe, but I believe that we have been sold I feel like we've been told that we are not one. We are divided. We are people of different mindsets. And I think unfortunately it's that is getting louder and louder. But I do not think that people themselves are less kind. I think if you think about in neighborhoods, people do still help each other. People do still offer assistance. And in work settings where that's being amplified, I think it's possible to elevate that. So, and by the way, when I started this work, I felt like a lone wolf. I didn't know anybody else who was talking about kindness. I knew no speakers who were doing this work. And now I have a cohort of other speakers who I know also talk about kindness. I know that there are people who are building businesses in workplaces around the topic. So I feel like at least there's more people focusing on that. Maybe that's helping us amplify that positive way that we can have a choice. We can make a choice. I don't want to be told that I'm going to be different from everybody else in the world because I don't believe that we really are at the bottom line. I think we all want safety, we want to belong, we all want to live our lives and not have the difficulties thrown at us every single day. So I guess that would be my short answer that I think companies they can play a role in that. And I definitely want to support companies that I think that's important to them as well.
And it sounds like you've seen a real like uptick in this. Like a lot of people are understanding that this can affect your bottom line from just some acts of kindness and like taking some breaths and some gratitude. Like it seems so simple, but it's
Right.
so hard for so many people.
Right.
Why do you think it's
I
so
think
hard?
that
Why
is
do people struggle with, "Here's Linda, free information. You can do it right now in 30 seconds," but people will still walk away and not do this. Why do you think that is, Linda? Tell me. What do you know?
I think there's a lot of times people are hurt. They've had trauma in their lives. People like the hardest question for me to answer is what do I do with someone who's in my company and they're really unkind? And I believe that someone who's really unkind is probably struggling with something because they've been hurt. They've had trauma as a child. Maybe they haven't dealt with it. Maybe they haven't been able to move through any of that. And sometimes being kind to someone who is unkind, as hard as that is, can help break them open so that they can now elevate to a higher person. And so I'd say kill them with kindness. That's a phrase, but I do believe that it can take someone to really sit down with someone who's struggling, and I've read so many stories about this with the person who I was a difficult student and my one teacher believed in me and they sat down with me and they gave me tools that helped me I was different or I had social anxiety or whatever it was. And that one teacher could really make a lasting difference on that student. So I think the same is true in business. If you have someone who feels unkind to you, and I actually have so I have this kindness bingo. I created it for one of my senior living clients and one of the squares. And so you can do it as a competition, a little fun between departments. But one of the squares said, smile at someone you struggle with. And I had a general manager come to me and we were doing the bingo and it was going on for the month within their organizations. And she said, it was so funny. I had a front desk person who came to me and they said, I can't do that one because the person I struggle with, there's just no way that's going to make a difference. Anyway, they decided they would do it, smile and say hello to the person you struggle with. First day they do it, second day they do it. By the third day, the person came a bit around. And I think by the end of the week, it was like a totally different experience. And so the front desk person went to their general manager and said, I'm shocked, but maybe it was me. So there's suddenly this awareness that maybe you have something to do with the interaction you are having.
Maybe it was me. Isn't that the case, Linda? Isn't that the case? Yeah. I love that story. And it feels what I love most about what you said that you put on that bingo card was that you are also managing these interpersonal relationships. It's not so much even managers to employees, but like employee to employees, and acknowledging that there are relationships there that you can also support amongst employees or team members.
Exactly. And sometimes it's really fun to just figure out how can we support each other. In the end of the day, your employees show up and they have a whole life happening outside of
Yeah.
their organization. So it's never really about you or your organization. It's you are managing someone that's having a human experience. And we all know that there are seasons that are incredibly difficult. I have a new client that I just started with, and I really don't know their leadership. And we had our first session. And I saw one of the gentlemen came in late, like at the very beginning of my thing. Everybody else had been there for a while. He looked like he was pained. One of the managers asked him, what's going on? I could definitely tell something was going on. And when I left at the end, we did our session, but I happened to see him at the elevator. I said, I think I noticed something's going on with you. And he shared with me he was having some physical issues, was having trouble with some of the medical community. And that was all over his face. We know that people come to our jobs, they show up and they're going to try to do the best they can. But sometimes you really have to have patience and grace with people. And especially throughout the pandemic, I think that just became imminently clear that patience and grace are one of the kindest ways that you could be with your teams, with your leaders, with your employees, and just be available. Because if it's not this season for you, it'll be this season soon for you that you also are going to be dealing with your own outside of work big deal something. I hate to say that, but it's definitely true.
They're real people. And so
Right.
acknowledging them is not just like they're here and they're like this person for these 8 hours and then they're not something else beyond. I think it's an important point. And I don't know how we've made it through this whole interview without using the word empathy, because what you shared with that gentleman at the elevator, like that is extremely empathetic and learning to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So what is one thing you wish you would have known before, like, you got started on this kindness journey?
One thing I wish I had learned when I started my business as a professional speaker might have just been you can do your best. I know you talk about sales and marketing, and it's like there's some type of journey for you that could take longer than what you envision. And I think for me, I had high expectations about what I'd be able to do at the beginning. And in any way, it's taken its own sort of route. And there's been so much learning in that. And I'm thrilled to be where I am today. And the clients that I get to work with are incredible. And yeah, it maybe took a little longer to build that part of the business, but I feel like maybe there was some divineness in that happening. I'm thrilled with where I am. And I guess if I would tell my younger self something, my 10-year-old 10-year ago self, I would say, it's a journey. It's a journey. There's no end destination, and enjoy the journey as you're progressing through the business. And you will be more confident 10 years from now than you are today with the potential that's going to.
Well said. Linda, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your kindness here on the Millionaire Maker Show. I'm going to turn the time over to you. Tell us how we can find you and anything else you want us to know.
Wonderful. Thanks. My website is lindacohenconsulting.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's Linda M. Cohen. All my links are on my website, but I would love to connect with you if any of your listeners have a need for either a keynote speaker, for an all-staff meeting, or some other way. And I'd be happy to gift a book or two. So if I could get a email from you, first or second listener from the show, happy to send a copy of the book to you.
I love it. Linda, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you for listening to the Millionaire Maker Show with online business consultant and creator of the Millionaire Maker Funnel, Lindsay Anderson. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time.